Hi everyone, thank you for joining me here. This is going to be part of a bonus show for the podcast, the Gray Stage podcast. And we were informed that let me take a few steps back here. One of the big questions was, one of the questions that I had was, what was the last known interview that David Crowley ever did publicly? And we know he was posting on Facebook and on social media publicly up until December. And it doesn't appear to be anything weird or anything odd from his other posts, going back all the way to 2012 and all of that. So I don't see anything strange about what he was posting in those last couple months on social media. But trying to find the last known interview or podcast or anything that David Crowley did, I couldn't really find anything for 2014. So I don't know, that was like, well, maybe he just didn't record anything in 2014. But what you're about to hear right now is a very special interview with someone who was listening to a podcast in 2014, I believe in November of 2014. And she hears David Crowley call into the podcast. David Crowley is not the guest on the podcast, but he calls into this podcast, apparently on Blog Talk Radio. And is basically saying, he's fearing for his life, and there could be people after him, etc., etc. So I'm going to let this person go ahead and explain all of the details of what she knows about this call that happened. And I'm curious to hear everybody's views on it. But if anybody can help us kind of track down the source, what podcast would be good, obviously. Based on that, we could probably go back and find it. So if anybody can help us with that, please, we really need your help with this to find the podcast of where David is talking about this stuff. So that's what you're about to hear now on this bonus episode of the Gray Stage podcast. But if anybody can help us track down the source of this podcast, that would be great. So we know it's around November or December of 2014 when this happened. And we know that the person we're about to speak to was listening to a podcast on Blog Talk Radio. And it's a male podcast show. David calls into the show, and basically I'll let the person take it from there. So if anybody has any tips, any tools, any way to help us find the source of this interview, we would greatly appreciate that. All right, thank you all very much. Have a blessed day. Okay, we have now started this recording.
I had heard him over a Blog Talk Radio that year before he passed away. I would say sometime in October or November. And he was saying...
2014?
Correct, yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, in 2014. And I was just listening in to, some host, and I cannot remember his name. Otherwise, that would solve all the problems. So I'm having a hard time remembering who the host was to this Blog Talk. And it's just something you dial in a number and you listen in, or you can, hit a number and ask the host to speak with you. And I was just listening in, and I heard David calling in, and the host, picked it up, and David was, what caught my attention was he said he lived in Apple Valley, Minnesota, and I lived near there, so that caught my attention. And he was panicked, he was very upset, saying that he was not suicidal and that his family and himself were receiving threats, that they were going to be killed. And he kept repeating himself that he was not suicidal. And he was just very frazzled. And he said he was a producer of a movie. And I just wish I could remember more of that. I wish I could remember the host so people had something to go on. He was very upset. Very upset. Honestly, my opinion of it was like, oh my God, this guy's crazy, because, you hear something like that and you're like, oh, this is weird, And then after, what happened to his family, it was sometime after that I recalled it all, because I didn't even, I didn't link it all up right away. And then once I realized that that was the guy, it was quite shocking.
Now, how did you realize that it was the same guy?
Well, he said his name was David Crowley. And then...
Same voice?
Yeah, same, yeah. And he said he was a producer of a movie and he lived in Apple Valley. Not a lot of producers out here. I absolutely know it was him. And he was not calm at all. He was very scared. So.
Was he loud? Was he?
It almost kind of like your heart is racing, kind of feel.
Mm-hmm.
Like panicking.
Mm-hmm. Had you heard of David Crowley before all this?
No. Well, yeah, I think I just didn't link it all up because, my pastor, who I used to listen to, he would talk about this new movie coming out, and I don't remember too much of what my pastor said. I did not, in that call when I heard David panicking, I did not link all that up together either at that time.
How did the host take it? Do you recall?
He was like, whoa. From what I remember, I don't remember the whole conversation, like exactly, because, it's, 5 years ago or so. I just remember him to be like, okay, like he was trying to calm him down a little bit,
And David just called in. It was a call-in show. He wasn't a guest or anything like that.
No,
he calls in.
Not a guest. Right.
Do you know about maybe what was the show live, or do you think it could have been a pre-tape show?
It was
that
live.
It was
that kind of blog talk radio show. I believe most of them. Well, I don't know. I don't know enough, I guess, about blog talk, but at that time it was all live. Yep. And I know it was like some kind of, the host was like linked up with Paul Begsley, which is a pastor, internet pastor, end time news prophecy. And I know that I must have been referred through Pastor Paul's website, through his YouTube or something, like, hey, listen to this guy, because that's what I was doing. I was just listening to, end time news stuff, and so I know it had to have come from a link from Paul Begsley, because honestly, I really just mainly listened to him at that time.
Did he do that for a lot of people, or always say, hey, check out this podcast or check out this person's podcast? That type
here
of
and
thing?
There he would, yeah. Yep, here and there he would. I didn't catch all of Paul Begsley's, shows or anything, but here and there I would hear him, and I heard him refer out people, "Oh, listen to this guy. So I know there's some kind of link with Paul Begsley, that for the host of whoever was hosting this.
Right. And for this host, this was just one male host, no co-host or anything like that.
Correct.
Did you only listen to this one show from this guy, from this host?
I don't
I might have
recall.
listened a couple times.
I don't recall.
Yeah. So anything else about the host? We know, okay, it was a male. He had a show, maybe a night show, a day show. It's a live.
I know.
Show.
It was during the day. I remember. It wasn't dark or anything outside. I remember it was cool. There was snow.
Would it be possibly a weekday or a weekend, or can you even sure?
I want to say it was during the school day because my kids weren't. Usually I can't get on, anything when my kids are around. You know what I mean? But and so I want to say it was like a school day. But you never know. They could have been, at my parents' for the weekend. So I'm not totally positive.
Okay. And that definitely gives us somewhere to go. I've never heard of any. I kind of went and tried to look and tried to find anything I could about that, but I think this gives me more to go and look back at. I wonder even if what's that gentleman's name? Paul Begsley?
Begsley. Yeah.
And he talks about like
YouTube. Yeah. He's big time on YouTube, and he has live streams. And it could be possibly. I believe he always did his YouTubes with the live streams at the same time.
Do you know maybe the time distance between when the recommendation came and when you might have heard this? I don't know if it's going to be really relevant, just only to try to find, only to narrow down a certain time of when this show happened. So you're saying between October and November 2014, right. You have no doubt in your mind that it was David Crowley.
Yeah.
And that he was saying that his family were
receiving threats, and that he's not suicidal. He kept repeating himself.
Interesting. It's interesting because you kind of wonder, well, okay, if he called in once to this show, maybe he called in to other shows too during this time too. I don't know, or maybe he's called in to this show. But from the call, it doesn't sound like the host knew him, right?
Right. And I'm just wondering if he was listening to Begsley as well, and then and heard about that live stream.
Yeah, and then just decided to call in.
Right, and you could possibly find things under the comments as well. In Paul Begsley, possibly.
Oh, that's good.
If we can get people to start searching. I've searched myself. Honestly, I don't have a lot of time. I'm pretty busy with the family and whatnot. I also don't have computer access to make it a little easier on me. So, if we can get people to start searching, that would be, it could, open up what went on. And I just know that he was really trying to get people to listen to him, that, he was receiving these threats, and it almost seemed like somebody said to him, "We're going to make it look like a suicide," like he was being told what was going to happen, because why would he have said, "I'm not suicidal," and he said that a few times.
Yeah, which is what we've been looking for, something like that. It is. It kind of makes me wonder though why he wouldn't say anything on social media. Why is he? If he's calling into a show too, maybe he's calling into a lot of shows. Maybe there's other shows he called in as well. I don't know. I mean, the mind just starts to kind of wonder all of these questions. But I think if people can just help us kind of, find out when the show happened, get a date, get a time, whose show. Like, I think that's your biggest point. If we just find out whose show it is, that's pretty much all that we would need, really. Can probably figure it out.
Right. There's a possibility that Dabo 007 possibly did it. And I don't know why that keeps coming to me, but he probably would have been the only other one I would have listened to more as well. And it could have been, a referral from possibly Dabo, but I really want to say it was from Paul Begsley.
Yeah, and he did a video on David's death that I think is worth going back and watching too. I'll have to go back and look at that to see if he mentions anything.
Or even reach out to him. He doesn't always say everything online. He keeps a lot to himself. You kind of have to when you're in that industry.
Okay, thank you a lot. I really appreciate that. Any final words that you want to say here for anybody?
Yeah, just search. I mean, I just want David's name to be cleared. I know he didn't do this. I used to work in the area that David and Camille lived as well, and I actually seen them. I never linked up anything, that's David. I didn't even know who they were, when they were coming through the store that I worked in, and they were a beautiful family, very happy. And I really
what they were going in there to purchase? Or?
Food. I'm thinking it was food.
Okay.
So they were grocery shopping. And I just really feel like David's name needs to be cleared, because just even with all the evidence and everything, and then from what I heard, I just know in my heart, he didn't do this. And there's somebody out there that did do this. And I have thoughts about that too. So, but I'll keep those to myself for now. But search, search and help us out. Because he needs his name cleared, and the real person needs to go to jail, prison.
Was your interaction with them at the store, was it just brief, just in passing?
Oh yeah, it was just a smile. Exchange? Yeah, a smile.
Were they just walking together, holding hands, fighting, nothing?
No, nothing like that. He was very happy. She was beautiful with her big smile and just an absolute 10. She was just so gorgeous and happy. Both of them very happy. You could tell they were in love,
Very sad.
And honestly, I thought David was really hot. I mean, I'll just put it out there. I thought he was a very good-looking man, but she was a very good-looking woman.
They really stood out. They stood out.
Yeah, they stood out. They were. You could tell they were a good family, and
And then somehow you found this case And then I don't want to get into too much of that, but is there like a time frame, like the last year, 2 years, or longer?
I was searching for something on this case, and, I haven't been, in social media for quite some time because of some other reasons, and every time I would jump on, and then I, wanted to try to find something, I couldn't really find anything on them, but I don't know what led me to the social media site that I found you guys on within the last year. But I found the social media website for, the one I'm talking about. And then I was like, yeah, this is, and then I kind of said something back in September, and I think I just didn't give enough information then. And then a week or so ago, I heard a little bit of the information that you guys did have, and it didn't sound like the information I had. So then that's what really made me reach out to you, Greg. And I just wanted that to be out there because, there's got to be something that can point everybody in the right direction. And, for the police department, I don't think the police department, I think there's bad apples in anywhere you go. I think the police department, any experience that I've heard of, because like I said, I've lived around that area, they were there to protect and serve. But it doesn't mean that, things weren't brushed under the rug with this case. It just, I don't know. Any experiences that I ever had with them, it was always the right way. They did things the right way. But with this case, it's clearly things weren't done the right way. And I wonder why.
Yeah, I think we all kind of wonder that. It got to a certain point, and they were just kind of, everybody was told what to go with, and that's kind of what it looks like here. I mean, I think you had a lot of people that were trying to do something, to find what the truth was, but I don't know how normal it really is within 24 hours to come out and say that the case is solved, basically.
We don't even have autopsy or anything done.
Yeah, I don't have anything. The body is not, they haven't even looked at David's body at that point. It's crazy.
And I do know that, my daughter, my son, they know some of these people that lived in the neighborhood of the Crawleys, and, very close, neighbors, not in relationship-wise, but distance-wise. And I heard several times that the neighbors were very freaked out about this case. And I heard a lot of the neighbors put up surveillance because of this case. But I haven't directly talked to those neighbors, but my kids came back and said some things to me. A lot of people talk about the Crawley case in Apple Valley still.
Do they talk about the official theory, or is it questions like with the Philip Marshall case?
They know something not right happened.
Yeah, that is weird to get surveillance cameras right after. I mean,
a lot of those neighbors were freaked out. Yeah. Yeah.
Were they freaked out that there was still a killer out there? Or just...
I would say so, because why would they have put the cameras up if David was the person who did this. He's dead, right? So they put up surveillance because they knew something else was going on.
Interesting.
You know.
I wonder if these neighbors also have their own questions about things that happen. We don't really hear that much from the neighbors, except for one. That's about
it. Yeah. I didn't get too much into that one, but you know, but I mean, maybe that would be, you know, a good start to hear from them as well, you know.
Yeah. Anything that shows that David Crowley felt that there was a threat, I think, you know, will really help. And when trying to find when the last time David Crowley spoke in public, it was difficult. I couldn't find anything past 2013, I think. And it's like, wait a minute, he's doing all this stuff, and why isn't he more active? He's active on social media. He's active on Facebook, on Twitter, on all that. I don't know. Maybe YouTube just wasn't that big of a thing to just, you know. It seemed like he was recording a lot of stuff, but even he stopped recording things around the same time that you're talking about. October to November of 2014 is a very important period there. A lot of crazy things, a lot of interesting things, whatever you want to call it. To me, they're crazy. A lot of stuff is happening during that time, and then they just go silent.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's really, I don't know. So when you brought that up, and that David's calling in and, you know, making sure that people know that he's not crazy,
right?
You know, and that he's not suicidal, and people are threatening him, stuff like that, you know, is not mentioned in any of the police reports or anything. They might not know about these things. I don't know, but they definitely went through all of David's the mail, and, you know, through all of his text messages and everything, and they didn't report of any threats, of any people threatening David. David has publicly stated way back, even in 2012, he was getting threats. So it's not a big shock there, but it is a little strange how, you know, if there were threats mentioned in a text message, in a phone call, on a radio show, none of that is mentioned in this case, because obviously that's not going to help. It's not going to help them prove that David Crowley is guilty. It might actually give us some reason to maybe doubt that he is. So I think you hit on something really, really big.
In those threats in 2012, was he saying that the threats were similar to what I heard?
Yes. No, they were more towards him, I think, not really towards the family, and he didn't really make it a point to say, you know, that there were, you know, that I'm not suicidal or anything like that.
Okay.
I haven't heard anything like that. The only time I think Sean Wright has publicly said something that David Crowley told him that he was not suicidal, and on the Hagman and Hagman show, privately, one of the hosts said that David said that he was not prone to suicide. So there's a couple things like that, but there's no audio where he just comes out and says, "Hey, I will never kill myself." You know, I'd love to find that audio if it's out there. So, but
when did he say that to?
General.
Oh, okay. When did he say that to Hagman? Yeah.
Pull that up for you right now. That would have been, I want to say 2014 as well.
Right.
No, it would have had to have been whenever he was on the Hagman and Hagman shows. I'll have to look that up here. I did have that note here somewhere.
So I did listen to Hagman and Hagman too, and that was somebody that Paul Begley would have talked about.
Right, but that was said after David died. Okay, so that's... So after David died, the Hagman and Hagman show, they were actually one of the only ones that really came out and were like, hey, why aren't people questioning this? And they were very vocal about that. And I know they've gone through some family problems.
Recently, yeah.
So let me see. CanadaFreePress.com is where the article is from. Number 79. It's a good thing I source things in my books. That's really handy here. Doug Hagman. Okay, and that must have been 2012. So the Hagman and Hagman report. They report on January 25th, 2015, talking about how David said that he was not prone to a suicide back in 2012. Even way back then, it's just strange how there's just not more. And maybe that's because in 2014, David was working on his film and pitching it, so maybe he was trying to stay, obviously you don't want to be talking about that, talking about people trying to kill you if you're, or all of these threats and stuff, if you're trying to pitch a film script to a company, and then you have people that you're trying to keep out of that film script. You don't want them to put any roadblocks in your way, I guess we'll say. But I think you found something very important here, and I hope that we can get some clarity on that, and maybe somebody can help us find it. One of my fears is that it is taken down. But I know we have some great people out there who might be able to help us find it, find something, find anything, any clue that will help us find out more about this call made by David. I think that is a big deal, and that is something that we could possibly give to investigators to give them more reasons to reopen the case.
Right. Well, I hope this helps, and it would be great if it does, because the person who did this, they're still running around, and they need to pay for what they did. There's a murderer out there, and not only a murderer, but I mean, the way he did that was just really, really bad.
Very cool. Would you be open to maybe coming back on if we are able to find any leads or anything like that, or if people might have some other questions?
Sure.
About it?
Yes. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you very, very much. I appreciate it.
Thank
hope
you.
Have a good day, and we will be in touch.
Thank you. You too. Take care.
You too. Bye now.
Bye-bye.
Our feelings do not give us justice. Things aren't so just because we think it's so. And the family and friends have got to understand that. We're people that are just looking at this from a distance. I want to thank you all again for listening to this podcast. I really appreciate it. This is the monthly podcast, the Gray Stage podcast. Thank you so much. We will be back next month. Thank you.